Hello, everyone. Welcome into Winnipeg Sports Talk. My name is Connor Hrabchak. Today, joined by Lyss, Houde, and together, we're going to be previewing this Winnipeg Jets versus St. Louis Blues series. It's, one of our many episodes, so hit that notification bell. We'll be previewing this series on this channel a ton over the next couple of days, heading into Game 1 on Saturday night. Lyss, what were your thoughts when the Jets got matched up against the Blues?
Listen, I believe a lot of very tempered things about the playoffs in the sense that every good team is a team that you'll have to run into at some point. So, it's easy enough to be like, oh, thank goodness they drew a wild card matchup. But at the end of the day, everyone who sneaks into the playoffs in any capacity comes with their own, whether it be baggage, their own skill sets, their own things that make them a tough opponent. So the St. Louis Blues are not a team that I'm necessarily writing off by any means. Everyone knows that they went on one of the longest win streaks in almost NHL history this year, the longest in their franchise history. And they have a lot of young players who don't have that added pressure of there being so much for them to prove. This isn't a team that's, at the end of a window. They're at the beginning of a window, if not, and they're a little bit of a retool right now. So I think this is a team that could be sneaky good. So the Winnipeg Jets definitely need to come prepared.
Yeah, and they've been more than sneaky good since the Four Nations break, 19-4-3. So that just reinforces your point about every team in the playoffs is good. You're going to have to face good opponents. And since the Four Nations break, the St. Louis Blues are quite literally the number one team in the NHL by points. With today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're not going to be doing the typical series preview. We're going to run through 4 different X factors in this series, and we're going to each pick one of them. If you're here with us, we're premiering this live on YouTube right after WST. Play along with us in chat. We're going to go through the Winnipeg Jets X factor that we think that could have a big impact in this series, a St. Louis Blues player to shut down, a unit, so that could be a power play, a penalty kill, a line pairing, anything like that, and then a storyline that intrigues us. We'll end the episode with that. But Lyss, I'll go to you first. Who's your Winnipeg Jets player that you think could maybe have a bigger impact than people might think?
I think that if anyone here is listening that is also a listener of Winnipeg Sports Talk Sunday Live, you might have heard this take a little bit before. We've kind of flirted with it a few times just because both myself and Connor and our third co-host Jacob, we are all pretty high on Morgan Barron, but I'm going to put him into this category of, I think in the playoffs, we often see that all-stars, they are all-stars. Don't get me wrong. Some of the best players in the world come out and show up and show out for their teams. But sometimes you need those depth guys to really pull up, especially if the teams match top heavy for top heavy, like the Winnipeg Jets have in the past, with the Robert Thomas line sometimes going up against the Mark Scheifele line. Your depth is going to need to come out big. And, I'm not sure if I'm feeling super ready and super confident to feel confident in a Kyle Connor or Mark Scheifele super hot stick shooting 30% or anything like that going into this playoffs, right? So I think it's important to look at some of these depth guys. And I think especially with Gabe Vilardi and Nikolai Ehlers being out, if you're the St. Louis Blues and you're looking at your scouting report and whatnot, you're focusing on a lot of those big guys, the Josh Morrisseys, the guys who can be a threat. So I think someone like Morgan Barron, who has been continuously improving since he moved to the center position a few weeks ago, might be ready to take on some of the heavier parts of the game that we know exist in playoff matchups. And he's had, a really, really good stretch kind of in the spring so far. So I think he's a guy who could really play a big role for the Winnipeg Jets, especially if he's playing with Brandon Tanev or someone like that, depending on who's healthy. I think that line could bring some of that physicality and that aggression that is needed to play, with a trademark playoff hockey, right? So I'm excited to see if Morgan Barron can be an X factor for this team.
I love this pick. Morgan Barron has been much better since the trade deadline, which is right when he moved to center, right when the Winnipeg Jets acquired Brandon Tanev. I'm really interested to see what that fourth line looks like. And I mean, it's an old saying that there's always a depth guy that, emerges and has a big impact in a playoff series, but it's true. There's always is a depth guy that has 3 goals that you didn't expect seeing coming. And Morgan Barron had a goal in the Jets' last game against the Blues to end the regular season there, a big one to open the scoring. Probably his nicest goal of the year. So, and then he did the exact same goal.
That's a goal that you can burn Ryan Suter on every time if you want to. So yeah, 100%.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you on this pick. This is a good pick. For my Winnipeg Jets X Factor player, and again, X Factor player, we're not taking Josh Morrissey, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Connor Hellebuyck. We know those players have to be at the top of their game if you're going to win a playoff series. That is no secret. I'm going to go down to the second line here. This player has also revitalized his game the second half of this season. My pick's going to be Cole Perfetti. Yes, Lyss, this is your guy. With no Gabe Vilardi and no Nikolai Ehlers, at least to start the series, Cole Perfetti needs to step up. The Jets need some kind of secondary scoring. Perfetti's probably going to be on that top power play unit with both Ehlers and Velarde out. Again, Velarde's day-to-day. We'll see if he ends up playing, maybe early in the series to the middle of the series. He's skated 3 straight days. We're recording this Friday morning, and he's expected to skate again today. But having said that, Cole Perfetti, 50 points in 82 games this year. That's a career high. He's much more defensively responsible, especially the second half of this year, doing a lot more of the dirty work along the wall, playing better off the rush. Like, he has completely just revitalized who he is as a player the second half of this season. Right after that prick comment, which he said, really changed his game, but I'm not reading into that too much. I think Cole Perfetti, the reason I'm picking him is for that secondary scoring aspect. It's what Nikolai Ehlers has been relied on to do for years now for the Winnipeg Jets. And Cole Perfetti has a chance to do it in this playoff series. If the Mark Scheifele line is going and Cole Perfetti can carry his line as well, that would be a huge development for the Winnipeg Jets and go a long way in upping their chances of winning this series, Lyss. I know you love Cole Perfetti, but any thoughts on that pick?
I 100% agree with you, and I think I echo all those thoughts in that everyone needs to step up a little bit more in the playoffs. That's kind of just how it works, right? And so what that looks like is the guys who have been scoring pretty well in the middle of the lineup, they need to kick it up a notch as well. And I think he has all the tools to be able to do so. And I think, we can talk about how great his second half of the season is, but I would never be so inclined as to say that, wow, like, this is so crazy, I can't believe this happened. We all saw this coming, right? We have believed in this player for quite some time, and we know what he's capable of doing. And I will say with the utmost confidence that we haven't even seen the best of him yet. So I think it'd be pretty sweet if we could see the best of him in this series against the St. Louis Blues.
He also has the chance to kill a lot of narratives because Cole Perfetti is too small and too slow to compete in a playoff series. And if he comes out and I use big time air quotes there, let me just clarify. If he comes out and puts up a lot of points in a playoff series, that'll go a long way to earning him a lot of money on his next contract and putting away a lot of narratives about who he is as a player, fair or unfair. So this is going to be a very, very interesting series to start us off for Cole Perfetti. Our next topic list is we're going to pick a St. Louis Blues player that the Winnipeg Jets need to keep an eye on. They need to shut down. They can't let this player run wild. Who's your pick for a player that the Winnipeg Jets should keep an eye on and need to shut down in this series?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go off the board's the wrong pick, but I'm going to go with Brayden Schenn. Brayden Schenn has been with this team for a very long time. He's their captain, and he is a guy who is playing with a couple of guys who have the potential to be X factors for the St. Louis Blues, and Jimmy Snuggerud and Jordan Kyrou. These are two guys who, Jordan Kyrou, I believe, has put up a career high in points this year. He's had a really good season. Like, he's awesome, but he's a guy who definitely has, I think, another year even still. I'm really, really high on that player. I think he's pretty sick. And Jimmy Snuggerud is one of those young guys who came over. He's playing in his rookie, well, it's not even his rookie season right now, right? Because he's going to be eligible for the Calder next year because he didn't play a full season this year.
Yeah.
And so Brayden Schenn is a guy that not only can he bring the most out of those players if that line starts kicking into high gear, because Jake Neighbors, Robert Thomas, and Pavel Buchnevich are likely going to stick together. That's a unit that they really like right now. He also brings that kind of more like the less tactical aspect of the game in the sense of the playoff aggression, the physicality. There's the storyline of the brothers. This is their captain who's been with the team for a long time and was with them in 2019. Like, I think there's a lot of the emotional aspect that Brayden Schenn can really enhance as well. So I think if he's a guy that they can stop from, whether it be going on a run or getting a lot of momentum, I think that could be really big for the Winnipeg Jets to just kind of contain him a little bit. And, we use this logic with Cole Perfetti, so it would be unfair to not use it here. The second line, I feel like, always has the potential to be one of the most interesting ones, because if you go top for top with your top lines and kind of try and balance them out there, or if they go checking line versus top line on both sides, like, it depends how the matchups go. The second line always has a little bit of potential to have some extra open ice. And I think that, this line in particular, I'm kind of circling, and Brayden Schenn is kind of the driver emotionally of that line in this series, in my opinion, just because of all these extra storylines that I kind of mentioned.
For sure. I'm going to take you took the second line center right there. We've got the projected lineup up for the St. Louis Blues, Brayden Schenn. I'm going to take the top line center, Robert Thomas. Since the Four Nations break, the St. Louis Blues are 19-4-3. I mentioned that off the top. Robert Thomas is the leading scorer in the NHL since the Four Nations break. He's got 40 points in 26 games. He's got 18 primary assists over that time, so he's not just lucking into points. He's got 18 primary assists in 26 games. He's been on an absolute tear. He's one of the biggest reasons why their power play is up over 27% since the Four Nations break as well. And I'm mentioning everything since the Four Nations break because for this St. Louis Blues team, you almost have to throw out everything that happened, pre-coaching change, everything in 2024, and just take everything in 2025 because they're a completely different team. And a big reason for that is Robert Thomas. The Winnipeg Jets did a great job shutting him down when the Blues were here in Winnipeg and the Jets won that game 3-1. They actually matched up Mark Scheifele's line with Kyle Connor and Alex Iafallo up against Robert Thomas in that game. So I'm fascinated to see if they go with the Lowry line, if they keep it with the Scheifele line. But the Scheifele line dominated the Robert Thomas line in that game and was easily the biggest reason why the Jets were able to be so successful in that win. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on as soon as game one. Even if the Blues start Robert Thomas to start the game, who are the Jets countering with? Like this is something we're going to find out immediately in game one. And Robert Thomas has the talent to put up 12 points in 5 games, and you can't let that happen if you're the Winnipeg Jets. So the matchup there is going to be very, very key. And this is a lineup, like I said, since the Four Nations break, has been on an absolute tear. The very next thing list that we are going to pick, and thank you everyone for joining us on YouTube. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you hit the like button down below. The next thing we're going to pick is a unit. So this could be a power play. This could be a penalty kill. This could be a pairing. This could be any unit grouping on either the Winnipeg Jets or the St. Louis Blues. Lyss, I'll let you go first on this one. Which unit are you picking as maybe an X factor in this series?
I feel like I'm going to pick a bit of a weird one. And also, I do need to correct myself. Jordan Kyrou career high goals, not points.
Goals. There you go.
Fake news on Winnipeg Sports Talk over here.
I believed you. All good.
Point still stands. But going into the units here, I'm going to pick a bit of a goofy one. And I'm going to go with the forecheck. And I think the Winnipeg Jets, especially deeper in the lineup, I really like their forecheck. That's a bit of a silly thing to say. But, this is a team that can carry the puck, but they do rely a little bit more on dumping the puck, winning ozone draws, and really holding on to the puck. We know that, for example, a couple games ago, there was a goal that Josh Morrissey scored, I believe it was in the Chicago game, where it was just a masterclass by the top line of holding on to the puck for 90 seconds in the offensive zone and waiting for the right opportunity. And that's why, we don't rely too heavily on Corsi metrics or anything like that with the Winnipeg Jets, because they look for their shot. And when it comes to the forecheck, their head is up, they're looking around. And when you dump the puck in, the goalie often will go behind the net and play the puck. Jordan Binnington is a really good puck handler. Jordan Binnington almost gives them a 6th player on the ice. And so I think that that's going to be a really interesting thing to keep an eye on. I've said this for months and months and months, and it's been the thing ever since the Winnipeg Jets lost in the playoffs last year. It's that what's going to convince me that this year could be different is if we see better adjustments from the group, depending on what happens. And this is something that I could see them potentially needing to make an adjustment around. If Jordan Binnington, if they're dumping the puck in and it's hitting that back wall behind the trapezoid, and Jordan Binnington is able to make a nice, not a full exit pass, but a nice little clean touch to one of his players, and the St. Louis Blues are able to break out of their zone without too much pressure from the Winnipeg Jets forecheck, they're going to have to start carrying the puck a little bit more. And I believe they have specifically the centers to do it. Mark Scheifele, Vlad Namestnikov, Adam Lowry, and Morgan Barron, I think, are all have the right skill set to do that. And I don't think that they're going to jump to that right away. But Jordan Binnington, I think, has the potential to kind of sour the forecheck a little bit, especially on the dump and chase. So I'm very interested to see what happens if that's the case.
I am very interested in that as well, because we saw it with Joel Hofer when the Blues played the Jets a few weeks ago. I'm going to keep bringing up that matchup because it's the most recent one we have. But both Blues goaltenders are great at playing the puck. And Joel Hofer was very aggressive in playing the puck. He would hold on to it. He would wait and make the pass, not just to the defenseman in the trapezoid, but up the wall as well. So this is going to be really interesting as well. I agree. Jordan Binnington, how does he handle the puck? How aggressive does he get? How cautious is he in a playoff series to make a stretch pass from his goal line? He might get super aggressive. He might not. But either way, it's a big part of the forecheck and what the Winnipeg Jets want to do. So I definitely agree with that pick. My pick, I had to get my guy Dylan Samberg in here, Lyss. You know I had to somewhere. I'm taking the Samberg-Pionk pairing. Dylan Samberg and Neil Pionk, the freshly signed Neil Pionk, I should add, a 6-year contract extension yesterday morning. But this pairing is such an X factor for me. And I had to bring them up because no slight to Brendan Dillon, but Brendan Dillon and Neil Pionk, their metrics were roughly break even across the board, both in goals, expected goals, shot share, whatever metric you wanted to look at. The Brendan Dillon, Neil Pionk pairing was breaking even. Dylan Sandberg has stepped up into that second pairing, and this is an elite second pairing now. They're up over 55% in goal share and expected goal share, shot share, every metric you want to look at. They are elite. And that's a big part to Dylan Sandberg's emergence. It's a big part in Neil Pionk having a bounce back season. And this matchup gives the Jets such an advantage. If they can put Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk up against the Robert Thomas line as a shutdown pairing, who can provide some offense as well. Like Neil Pionk just got $7 million, and it's not for his defensive impact. It's for what he can do offensively as well, right? But that line is such a key asset for Scott O'Neill and this coaching staff. If he can put him up against Robert Thomas and they can win their minutes, or put him up against Braden Shen and win their minutes, they're going to have to take one of those two matchups. And I feel like the Jets should be pretty confident that they're going to win that matchup with Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk shutting down one of those top two lines against the St. Louis Blues. And that's something that the Jets didn't have last year against Colorado. The Brendan Dillon, Neil Pionk pairing going up against the Casey Middlestat second line, or going up against Nathan McKinnon, if that was the matchup, they would lose that matchup last year. But this year, I think that's a huge advantage for this year's Winnipeg Jets team. I had to get my guy Dylan Sandberg in there. The Winnipeg Jets are 44-12-2 with him in the, or 45-12-2. They ended the season with a win there over Anaheim with him in the lineup this year. So they're a pretty darn good team when Dylan Sandberg's in the lineup. And I think that pairing is going to have a massive, massive series. The last thing we're going to be drafting today, Lyss, is a storyline. What is something that you are intrigued in, maybe not on the ice, maybe off the ice, around this series? I've got a really good pick for this one, but I'll let you go first here.
Okay, well, because I have a better one. No, I was thinking about this one, and I think what I did is I pulled up some playoff results from last year, the year before, because those are very similar seasons in that they were a little bit underwhelming. Not that we were super high on the Winnipeg Jets going into them, but we certainly weren't expecting them to get embarrassed 4-1 as quickly as they did after winning those first games and dropping 4 straight. And then 2019 as well, because hey, you kind of have to. There are some similarities in these rosters, not a ton, but it's the St. Louis Blues, it's the Winnipeg Jets, it's a round one matchup in the Central Division. So I pulled those some numbers, and I am not trying to become a Connor Hellebuck apologist in the sense of I think it's super fair for people to have question marks around Connor Hellebuck's playoff legacy.
Sure.
No problem with that on my end. That said, Dmitry Filipovich brought this up on the PDO cast the other day, noted friend of the show, Dmitry Filipovich. Yeah. And the Winnipeg Jets have not scored enough goals in their losses in the playoffs in the past couple of years. So if we were to look at 2019, 2023, and 2024, the Winnipeg Jets finished 7th in goals for per game, scoring at over a 3 goal per game rate every single season that I just mentioned. They were 7th in the league in goals scored per game in 2019, 21st in 2023. So that's pretty goofy. And then 15th the year before. So not, anything too crazy, but 3.2 goals per game, 3 goals per game, 3.15 goals per game, whatever. You look into the playoffs and they have their wins, right? They start with those couple of wins. In St. Louis, that series that year, they won games 3 and 4. In the games that they lost, let me read you these numbers off here, okay? Because obviously they lost 4 games in each of those seasons. In 2019, in the games that they lost, they scored 1 goal, 3 goals, 2 goals, and 2 goals. In 2023, in the 4 games that they lost, they scored 2 goals, 4 goals, and that game went to overtime. So by scoring 4 goals, they were able to push to overtime. 2 goals, 1 goal. Last year, in the 4 games that they lost, games 2 through 5, 2 goals, 1 goal, and 3 goals. That can't happen if you're looking to, compete all the way through in every single one of those games. And so I think it's super valid to have question marks around everybody on the roster, right? Because this is a team that was scoring over 3 goals per game every single game and never scored more than 3 goals per game in their entire playoff loss history in the last couple of seasons. I exclude the bubble because those rosters were so different, but they never ever were above that average in a game where they ended up losing, right? So I think it's so important that this group is able to score more goals. Obviously, that looks a little bit different if your goaltender saves a couple more, whatever. But you think about those big saves that people are looking for from the goaltenders. If you're able to score a couple more of those garbage goals, if you're able to hit the net a little bit better, so many different things, you take away the impact of having to make that save with a capital S, right? Which we know Jordan Binnington is capable of making that save, and especially in high pressure games. So I think it's really important that the Winnipeg Jets kind of hunker down on that goal scoring. And I think that that's going to be something to watch for, because if you have some of the leading scorers in the NHL and they're only scoring, one goal in this entire series, that's going to be a massive problem for the Winnipeg Jets.
For sure. And the Jets are atop the league in goals, and their power plays first in the NHL, and they've
They're
had a great
fourth in
year.
goals scored per game this year, by the
Fourth in
way.
goals.
So
There
yeah.
you go. Thank you. Thank you. I knew they were up there, but they're near the top of the league. And then first in power play, 29.8%. And their power play has kind of slid since the Four Nations break, if that's the theme of the video. So that is something to keep an eye on as well, with no Ehlers and no Velarde. How does the power play look against the St. Louis Blues in the first round, which goes hand in hand with your goal scoring? I love that pick, Lyss. My pick is going to be the schedule. We all love the schedule. Everyone's asking, when's the schedule? When's the first game? Well, we know the entire schedule, and the entire schedule is really interesting, actually, because the Winnipeg Jets start game one this Saturday, April 19th, the Winnipeg Whiteout, 5 p.m. Central. That barn is going to be absolutely rocking. Monday, April 21st, 6:30 Central is game 2 in Winnipeg. And then we have our first 2-day break going to St. Louis Thursday, April 24th at 8:30 Central. And then we have another 2-day break. The Jets will then take on the Blues in game 4 on Sunday at noon. And then we have another 2-day break going from game 4 to game 5 on Wednesday, April 30th, as the series shifts back to Winnipeg. And the reason I find this so interesting is because of the injuries surrounding both of these teams. Nikolai Ehlers is week to week. I think we can safely rule him out of at least the first 5 to 6 games of this series if he's week to week. Gabe Vilardi, though, will he play game 1? Not 100% sure on that. I'd list him as maybe on the wrong side of questionable at doubtful for game 1. But with all of these 2-day breaks, this gives him a chance to come back in the series maybe a little bit earlier than if it was every single other day. Because
it could be a 2-week series.
this is gonna be a 2-week series, exactly. So that's very interesting. And then from St. Louis's perspective, Dylan Holloway was listed week to week on April 4th. Jim Montgomery mentioned the other day that he's still week to week. There's been no change in his status, but that's another guy to keep an eye on. If this series goes deep and there's so many 2-day breaks, could he get healthy for the last couple of games? So I'm taking the schedule. It's the most interesting thing when we don't have it, because everyone is wondering when game 1 is here in Winnipeg. And then when we do get it, it's really interesting to see how many 2-day breaks are featured in this series, especially with players like Gabriel Vilardi on the brink of returning to the lineup for the Winnipeg Jets, which would just be a massive boost, both at 5-on-5 and on the power play and whatever aspect of Gabriel Vilardi's game you want to highlight for sure. Lyss, anything else on this series before we wrap up the video?
Yeah, I mean, I think we only skimmed the surface on so many of the different aspects of this game, and hockey is the most random, ridiculous sport in the world. So there are so many different things that could have such an impact on this game. But, in this series, we wanted to focus on a couple of different X factors, and I think we did a good job of outlining just how many, whether it be units, players, things, whatever, have the potential to just impact this series so much. So obviously, I know I speak for both of us when we say that we are so dialed for this to get started. Can't believe it's already tomorrow. I feel like the turnaround from the end of the regular season to playoffs is always so quick, but it's been what all of our minds have been on for quite some time since the Winnipeg Jets clinched their spot, what seems like many weeks ago. So I'm pretty dialed. I'm really excited. I think that the vibes are excellent around this team right now. I think this was kind of an honorary mention in the storyline for us. Having two key players on this team and Alex Iafallo and Neil Pionk sign longer term extensions right before the playoff series start. Both guys who were not drafted by the organization, both guys who are not Canadian, both guys who were traded here. Obviously Neil Pionk has signed a deal since he was traded here, but these are two guys who had no obligation to stay in Winnipeg, and they speak so highly about this group, and it shows in where they signed on the dotted line. And I think that energy is something that I have said this for years and years and years, but if the Winnipeg Jets are ever going to go on a run, or if it ends up with a Stanley Cup, hey, no one's going to be complaining. If they ever make it that far, it's going to be because they rallied as a group, and all those like subliminal teamwork things and that kind of off ice unity stuff, because of just how tight knit this group is. And that's how the Winnipeg Jets have to build a hockey team here. And I think they have a lot of the good pieces in the recipe right now for that, because the vibes are really good around the team right now. So I'm ready to just ride that high and see how the first couple of games go here in Winnipeg.
100%. And the whiteout is the best time of the year for Winnipeg Jets hockey. The street parties, the outfits, it's going to be so awesome. We're going to have you all covered here at Winnipeg Sports Talk. So on the way out, make sure you hit the like button on this video, hit that subscribe and hit the notification bell. Hustler and Frank Corrado of TSN, they're going to have their series preview tomorrow, Saturday at around 11, right after Illegal Curve. So hit the notification bell so when that video goes live, you will get a notification right on your device and you won't miss that video. Lyss and I will be back Sunday morning at 9 a.m. WST Sunday Live will be breaking down game 1 of the series. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you Sunday morning. Lyss and I, WST Sunday Live. See you then, and enjoy game 1, everyone. See ya.